Tumbril Land Systems was incorporated in 2536 on Ceci, with the specific goal of producing exploratory ground vehicles to assist with humanity's burgeoning stellar expansion. The company's founders, Kavya Crosby and Aaron Dowes, were lifelong homesteaders financed by the University of Sassy who believed that recent attempts to apply hover (HOV) technology to exploratory ground vehicles were the wrong track. The project took the slogan tough, fast, durable as the set of watchwords for creating their first wheeled design, the DX-20. The initial version of the DX-20 was created by Crosby and Dowes. The specifics of the vehicle were planned in record time, with specifications that called for bespoke prototyping that followed quickly after. The DX-20 was designed specifically to traverse the extreme environments of Yar's Red Desert, and intended to be capable of traversing environments ranging from sub-zero ice worlds to low marshes on aquatic planets. The pair spent years testing prototype after prototype in the wild, so to speak, in order to build a true rough and tumble craft. The DX-20 became available on the open market in 2537, following deliveries to initial investors late in the previous year. Initial sales were unremarkable, but the DX-20 proved itself popular among outbound colonial concerns, with end users praising the vehicle's ability to traverse extreme environments and its relatively simple maintenance requirements. The design team, it seemed, had delivered exactly what they had promised: a tough, fast, and durable all-terrain vehicle. While sales remained low, Tumbril itself seemed to be earning a reputation as a quality supplier of frontier-capable goods. The DX-20 seemed briefly set to be a symbolic vehicle of humanity's peaceful expansion into the stars. The DX-20 would not, however, go down in history as a revered explorer. Current events quickly caught up with Tumbril, namely the beginnings of the First Tevaran War. With the coming of the war, the shape and tenor of the UPE changed overnight, with investment in the colonization efforts ceasing immediately, and with designers and manufacturers around the known galaxy being recruited to adapt their machines and factories for the war effort. Despite all of the efforts for exploration, and desperate to outfit their expeditionary forces for the first major interspecies war, humanity's UPE army turned to Tumbril to convert the DX-20 into a tough, fast, and durable weapon of war. The DX-20 design team set upon the task immediately and quickly turned out the first military version of the vehicle, formally named the Cyclone by the UPEA. The vehicle's first moment of glory occurred in 2543 during fighting that would later be named the First Battle of the Argon Chain. A hastily equipped UPE Army unit operating armed cyclones found themselves with the high ground to overtake a significantly stronger Tevaran tank division. Colonel A.J. Crate, who would be awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions, devised a strategy that allowed his limited forces to deploy or capture the entire enemy complement. Crate ordered a third of his cyclones to the left and right flanks alongside the Argon Range, making sure that they could take care to make their positions easily visible to the enemy. Meanwhile, he positioned another contingent of cyclones armed with rockets along the ridge itself, allowing them to act as a makeshift artillery firing into the divided Tevaran forces in the valley below. His third and final group of cyclones remained camouflaged directly in the center of the battlefield, springing them and the rocket support only after the Tevarans seemed to believe they were assured victory. With one signal, Crate sprang the trap and engaged the Tevaran tanks at close range head-on battles. There, the handling of the Cyclone proved vital. While Tevaran tanks had trouble targeting at such short ranges, the Cyclones were able to maneuver through and around them during 3 hours of intense, almost face-to-face fighting. The battle was closely recorded by a group of embedded reporters, and the outcome made for a major propaganda victory. Additionally, several Tevaran tanks were captured whole, allowing essential research into the enemy weapons, which helped turn the tide during the early days of this war. For the rest of the war, cyclones were everywhere. They served in every impacted system and heavily behind the lines. The UPE government bought additional allotments of them by the tens of thousands, with production by the war's end encompassing 27 factories, together capable of completing a cyclone somewhere every 35 seconds. In the years after the war, Tumbril divided their corporate energies between attempting to recapture the explorer market and to continuing to satisfy lucrative government contracts. The former proved to be something of a victim of the latter, as countless cyclones produced by the war effort were now on the open market as surplus for equipment, reducing the overall need for newly built explorer models. As time went on, Tumbril became fully reliant on government contracts and extended a great deal of effort attempting to capture the Cyclone's success with more complex weaponry. While the company went to create the HOV weapon barges, tanks, artillery platforms, and other familiar weaponry of the Mezzer government, none proved successful or emblematic as the Cyclone. In the public sphere, the reputation of the Cyclone flourished. The ready availability of countless surplus vehicles, many never used in combat, meant that even the most cost-conscious homesteaders often had a Cyclone parked outside their prefab. The secondary market for parts and upgrade complements flourished, while Tumbril Land System itself suffered alongside other government contractors of the era. Their one saving grace was that the nimble Cyclone itself never became strongly associated with the Mezzer regime. By the time it fell, the Cyclone was seen as the heroic veteran of a more noble war, rather than a tool of oppression. A famous holograph showed a squad of Cyclones blockading outside Linton Messer XI's palace. Also reinforced the idea that the design belonged to the people. In 2862, Tumbril Land System shut down following a decline in interest in military vehicles. The company's assets were sold off, with factories being converted to build spacecraft for companies like Argo and MISC. Intellectual property, including the overall design and mark of the Cyclone, was sold to a consortium of small-scale buyers as part of the bankruptcy process. The Cyclone story should have ended here, but it didn't. In 2946, a joint venture of Devco CEO Terence Naban and a series of smaller investors surprised the empire by announcing they were bringing the Cyclone back, once again under the Tumbril branding. A small design team had spent 4 years modernizing the original DX-20 with 30th century components, once again aiming to equip explorers with reliable and iconic vehicle series. There was also the familiar aim to secure lucrative government contracts to build weaponry for the increasingly large Vandal conflict. Modern Cyclone factories were opened on Centauri, Terra, and Ellis, with other locations already locked down for expected expansion. Tumbril currently produces 5 distinct civilian variants of the Cyclone, in addition to the military-only model built for the United Empire of Earth's armed forces. The civilian models are largely based on aftermarket upgrades used by frontiersmen in the 28th century. They are the Cyclone, which is the base model, almost identical to the military model aside from the removal of some armor plating and classified control surfaces. The Cyclone AA, the anti-aircraft model. The AA is armed with a surface-to-air missile system and a set of countermeasures. It's a nod to the makeshift artillery version used in the Argonne Chain so many years back, though it is nominally equipped for light air defense rather than ground strikes. The Cyclone RC, which is the racing model. The RC is stripped down and has been given a modified intake system to improve speed and handling. It's an attempt to modernize the sport of buggy racing, popular among colonists on distant worlds without access to more organized entertainment. The Cyclone RN, the light reconnaissance model, if you can find it. It's intended for prospectors and other explorers who need access to fast and detailed in-person scans. It's armed with additional sensors and is configured for beacon deployment. The Cyclone TR, the heavy of the group. The Cyclone TR includes upgraded armor and a civilianized human-controlled turret that can mount a small gun. The TR is primarily sold to frontier worlds facing the threat of Vandal raids. Additionally, a Cyclone MT has been leading to the lineup that includes both a mounted turret as well as a missile system on board for the gunning position. Today, the Cyclone is the best-selling wheeled vehicle in the galaxy, surpassing even ubiquitous Greycat. The new Tumbril land systems is clearly ascendant, despite following in the footsteps of their predecessor and aiming for additional military contracts with revived Nova Tank. The company has stated that they intend to produce additional civilian variants of the Cyclone, should the need arise, with badged updated versions of the existing range on a yearly basis. The Cyclone MT is a sign of that commitment towards the future. This concludes our history of the Cyclone series, brought to you by Tumbril. This was originally in Jump Point 6.08. This was posted on June 2023, I should say. And it's a Whitley's guide. So I tried to give it a little bit of a spin, a little bit of a fun sound, but it's one of the older Whitley's guide, before the Jax McCleary videos, before all of that kind of, with Jimmy and such, and his production crew. So these older Whitley's guides are attempting to kind of, they're older, but once again, Jax took over. These are still canonical. I'm going to leave that in. I'm just having some fun tonight, just kind of going through some of these. Let's start with the Tumbrils for a minute. So Tumbril in general, the company that we know today, that we consider Tumbril, has a real wide variety of different items. I mean, you can see the Cyclones, you can see the Nova Tank, and its competitor, the Storm. And to me, they're its bread and butter. I've never thought of the Cyclone as an exploration purist vehicle. I would love to see something more geared towards exploring specifically. You know, we've seen the Mule, which is a utility vehicle. We've seen the ROC, which is a mining vehicle with scanners and such. The RCDS. I would like to see an actual exploration vehicle, preferably with a bed, a single bed on board. That's the sore spot for a lot of us, is that when the RSI Lynx came out, which is more of a luxury, let's go watch the sunset vehicle, or just a really cruising style transport. So yeah, I guess you could call that maybe exploration. It does have weapons racks. It enjoys a lot of the capabilities of the Ursa, just like obviously because they kind of the same frame, but one's a little better acceleration on the Lynx with less armor as a trade-off. I would like to see an actual Explorer variant. There's been a couple different variants I would like to see of a ground vehicle that has a bed, maybe basic hygiene on board, basic food, drink, etc., and has a decent scanner on board. You know, the normals. Maybe even like a news van equivalent camera on top of that thing. I can dream. Like my Mako news van. I love that little ship. But having a ground vehicle would be a neat little touch to have an Explorer. A true dyed-in-the-wool Explorer vehicle. I think as we get to larger and larger ships, and we get more and more ships that are capable of having those medium-class vehicles, or maybe even large-class vehicles, dare I say it, we could really do some interesting things. You could even have a drivable RV on the Spartan chassis, for example, and be able to really have some interesting layouts. I think that chassis really, they're just scraping the edge of what that thing can do. I think most people will point this out, though, is that you can only build these vehicles so tall because of the nature of ships. And it's not just about the size of the ship height. It's also about getting on and off the ramp. When your vehicle is at the apex of the ramp, where you're just literally entering or exiting the ramp, the back or the front of the vehicle will be scraping the ceiling of the storage area if it's on a ramp. So a lot of ships, due to their ramp nature, mean that the height can only be so tall for virtually any vehicle in the game. And that's just worth pointing out as a reminder. So You can only go so wide, you can only go so tall, you can only go so long to fit the measurements of these areas. I know it's something, but it's easy. I forget it all the time, honestly, but it is something worth pointing out. Now, Tumbril in general is interesting, but to me, the Cyclone series, the Cyclone MT, if we're talking about gameplay wise, is truly the standout, although it is very top heavy. The Cyclone MT basically is the TR combined with an AA. It doesn't have exactly the same capabilities as both, but it has a turret and it has missiles. It kind of, you can enjoy a little bit of both in the same package. So if you can only bring one Cyclone and you need to, you might be dealing with combat, it might be a good idea to bring an MT. Whereas I look at the other Cyclones and they're far more situational, or they could be for RP purposes or for racing, which is great. I'm glad they include that. But it's just worth mentioning that the MT kind of makes some of these a little bit redundant. And the RN in general as a beacon dropper is interesting, especially if you can't deploy a beacon on your person. Of all games I could cite, I think of Command & Conquer Renegade of all games. And during that time, you had a very expensive package where you could deploy the ion cannon strike or the nuclear weapon that could take out the enemy's base. It's a first-person shooter in the CNC universe. But the important part was it was 1,000 credits to get this beacon, and if you died with this beacon, it just dropped. It just evaporated off the face of the earth. So basically, if one player was going to beacon rush, you had to communicate with your team. There was defenses that you had to try to sneak past. There was rocks that were strategically placed, but it was very dangerous to do this. And you would desperately be deploying this beacon in the enemy base. But you had to hop out of your vehicle in order to do it. So if you were in a vehicle, deploying a beacon was almost like a bad mission, a very bad idea. And in general, you just wanted to, if you managed to defeat the defenses of the base and the enemy wasn't able to overwhelm you, you could just try to pop a building before you go down type of thing, or run inside the building and deploy explosives on the MCT, the modular command terminal, I think it was called, the mobile command terminal, the MCT, whatever it was in there. The control terminal for each building had a certain amount of hit points, a lot like the Titans in 2142. Another game I miss. But anyway, the beacon was deployable and you had to risk your character. The Cyclone RN to me really stands out in one weird way, is if you have to basically hop out of other vehicles to deploy a beacon, even if they are carryable by one player, that is a pretty big problem. So if these beacons that you can deploy allow friendly ships to come in, and that's a big deal. Not having to describe, oh no, you're not near me. Oh yes, you are now. And you don't have to just stand there waiting desperately, hoping that your friends find you and start moving in to deploy. A RN can get in to an enemy general area, deploy a beacon, and just keep racing around and get the heck out. And not having to stop a vehicle, risk the vehicle and yourself by hopping out of it just to deploy this thing and then get back in. I could definitely see RNs being very good for org uses. The AA also, interestingly, it's the countermeasure system they describe. It's like a mini EMP. It is. That's pretty nifty, but it's very short range. So, and like I said, the racing model for RP is interesting, but these are all like situational and for specific roles, which is fine. I mean, at the end of the day, I think the MT existing really kind of outmade the TR and the AA kind of obsolete in a lot of ways, unfortunately, but it is what it is. I don't think much of the base vehicle. I do wish it still had that armor plating that the lore is selling me it had. That would have been pretty interesting if it just had some strategically placed plating just at the front of the vehicle that protected the driver and the passenger in that vehicle. That would be kind of neat, actually. And it's also got, it should be pretty good for box runs. I would like to see it have even more, legitimized storage and such, and weapon rack and stuff. Speaking of Gray Cat, they poked a Gray Cat in this older article, but Gray Cat itself is going to have the UTV coming out. I'm betting that's going to be at IAE or maybe a special for CitizenCon, et cetera, et cetera. Like I got what I'm trying to say is I know it's going to be coming out at the end of this year. They've already showed the concepts for it and everything in a previous sale, and then I was surprised to see it just drift by the Navy sale at launch week. And obviously, it's not going to come out for Alien Week, so it would make sense for them to hold it back for IAE and make that the new LTI token. I'm pretty excited about that vehicle. The Gray Cat was my first vehicle that was not a ship, and it was also the first player usable anything. Being able to hop into a Gray Cat and drive around the hangar module was actually a really cool experience. Even when I got it stuck underneath my Taily's wing all the time or whatnot. I even love the fact that the CIG folks did not try to block it or add colliders to stop the vehicle from going places or going on the elevators and stuff. They enhanced it. They put in a track and a jump and stuff just for like bowling pin style storage things and stuff just for the Gray Cats. So I feel like going back to our roots, the STV was kind of a miss for me, the racing model. It's not from it's I'm sure it's for somebody, but it's not for me. But the UTV, I'm definitely keeping a close eye on. I'm very interested in that extra lighting. I'm interested in the extra storage space. And I would like to see them go back and do a pass through the Cyclones and add some of those capabilities back into the Cyclones, like more formally and more utility minded, and go back to their roots. Right here in this article, you can see that the original concepts for the Cyclone were not combat. The original concepts were being good out on the frontiers and in the worst conditions, being able to help the homesteaders. And what they're not really kind of glazing over is frontier capable goods and this and that. That's code words for this thing has to work and operate in terrible conditions with poor maintenance and very little to no parts available. And yet it still keeps kicking. And it needs to be able to do 20 different jobs at once in order to stay useful in the homestead, even if you were just given it. Because being able to work on this thing and dedicate supplies to it and keep it running it is an actual investment by the family. And that's kind of an interesting topic here that I think we're going to be talking about more and more, I think, legitimately when player outposts become about in a while. That's going to be an actual thing is, which prefabs do you build? They mentioned prefabs in this article, for example, just a hint of it once again. Then that's changed dramatically over time, what exactly those prefabs are. But having a garage to store ground vehicles is going to be a decision that may impact your ability to do other types of vehicles or may impact your ability to offer other kinds of services. So it would probably make more sense for orgs to kind of have plots that are right next to each other, and one specializes in the ground vehicle repairs and whatnot and upkeep. But you still have to stock parts and deciding, in that limited storage that everyone has for these vehicles, unless they're spawnable and storable that way through a pad, by the way, is going to matter. So it's some interesting stuff. Even just the space on the ship. Is it worth dragging along these specific type of vehicles over on the Liberators and the Hercules that are deploying these homesteads and these outposts and these vast gold rushes that players will have on the side of a moon? I don't know. I think one of the biggest downsides of the Cyclone in general that they have not touched after all these years in the lore is the fact that it doesn't have Atmo. They even have armor plating on it, but the thing never mentions, and then they pressurized it. It's something I think that the Origin folks over with the G12 and the ROC, they got it right, I think. I think the biggest miss is that there isn't a Cyclone that has Atmo on board. That would be very interesting, once again, from the explorer perspective. Having to bring your own air and having to worry about hot and cold, it should just reduce it, not completely get rid of the risk, but having to worry about freezing to death within a matter of minutes it certainly can put a damper on using these vehicles. And other vehicles would then take precedence. I can't stress enough how useful an Ursa is and how the new Lynx is by extension, but to a lesser extent because there's more drop seats in the back of the Ursa. but for fun and style. The Lynx is actually really cool. But I just feel like that's one of the things that the Cyclone kind of lets down their customer on. And I'm just interesting. I'm interested in seeing where Tumbril goes. I don't know if there's going to be that many new Cyclones, to be honest. I think they're going to go bigger and bigger and bigger. If any indication of all the new vehicles that are ground vehicles that are coming out, if they are any indication of the direction things are going, unless there's like a utility vehicle. And once again, I don't see a true utility vehicle coming out from Tumbril anytime soon that's new, that is a Cyclone variant. So yeah, that's what I got on this one. Thank you for stopping by on this. And don't forget, with lure videos especially, feedback is greatly appreciated. Likes are greatly appreciated. And thank you to my long-term subscribers for sticking around. Have a great one.